Welcome to Agronomy Moment. I'm your host, Wendell Cohen. We bring in people who agree with me, disagree with me, and above all, are not afraid to say it like it is.
Good day, everybody. We just welcome you back here to Agronomy Moment. We're going to do kind of the end of season thing here. One of the things that we keep getting conversations about is soybean maturity, planting dates, and how this all ties together with planting at different times. And I just want to do some clarification here, and hopefully today's video can be that. I am going to be joined here very shortly by two agronomists coming in to help simplify this and to say this in a more succinct manner, I think is a good way to say it, than to be too complicated. So we're going to dive right in. Oh, now I'm joined by Dickey and Celena Kipping, our two agronomists here to help talk about this topic of soybean planting dates and maturity. The goal here today is to simplify this a little bit, right? Maybe it's a complicated topic, but I want to simplify it enough, and so I'm just going to turn it over to you because I'm getting confused if I talk too long here.
You're getting us confused.
Okay, let's say this a little differently. I'm thinking, and you can challenge me on this if you think so, but I'm thinking of simplifying it into a point, Scott and Celena, in what we can understand that there is a difference between a short maturing soybean and a long maturing soybean. Now, we can affect some of the end of the road things that happen, as well as some of the pod fill and all that by when we plant. But let's dive into that just a little bit. What do we do when we plant early?
Start, Celena, or me too?
Go ahead.
Well, to me, one of the biggest things you do by planting early is you increase the vegetative growth time frame of those plants a little bit. You allow for a bigger factory, more nodes, bigger plant. You get more branching. You plant later, you wind up with shorter plants typically. Now, that could be, it's a hugely variable topic, but the earlier we plant, we tend to have more nodes. And to me, that's the basis of soybean yield is what can we do to maximize our node count on the plants. Yep. Typically, when we plant earlier, we have more time for that vegetative growth, get a bigger plant prior to reproductive growth starting. Sometimes when I've seen beans planted in early April, late March, that were flowering up to a month ahead of everything else. Yep. And so not only did we get a bigger plant, bigger factory, but we also opened up reproductive growth earlier, allowing for a broader, wider window of pod development, pod fill, yield development.
Yes. So, but when I plant a 4-0, or let's say in April, 1st of April, why is that different philosophy really than planting a 4.8, a late group 4 early?
Used to be we always planted early beans early, and I wouldn't want to have my feet held to the fire, but in my opinion of that, a lot of yield was in those 3s compared to what we had in later group 4s early on. I'm talking about the late 90s and early 2000s. Yes. However, I think as time's gone forward, we're seeing more yield potential in later beans now than we used to. And that's another positive for us because by taking a late bean that can yield very high, for example, we talk about if you're going to plant varieties, say we're in a zone of adaptation between a 4.0 and a 4.8, yes, you're going to tend to want to plant the later maturities of that zone within your area to maximize your yield. And again, that is an effort to expand your reproductive window. And so by taking now a late group 4 and planting it in early April, we're just taking advantage of all those situations because it's not only about pods and the nodes, that's a key, but it's also look at the light quality and quantity. If we plant in April versus planting in June, by the time we plant in June, we've already missed out on the most intense, highest quality light available to our crop. And so any light that's hit the soil through that point, to me, is wasted yield. And so by planting in April, we have beans developing, we get bigger beans earlier, we're harvesting higher quality light, longer day length, more intense light because the sun's higher up off the horizon, penetrating less atmosphere. And I know that seems pretty minor, but it's a big deal.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. So we have good quality light, but sometimes in some regions of the country, we have challenges with enough rainfall or rainfall at certain times. And so you have this tough piece of dirt or something. We say, well, if we do it in June, maybe we'll time it better. Some merit to that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Celena.
Yeah, I've a little bit, but also thinking about that later maturing variety adapted for your area, you do help mitigate that risk a little bit, because you still have potential to put on nodes and add to that reproductive part of the plant, that phase, to help drive yield. So yes, and yes but no, because you could still have planted early, say a 4.8, 4.9 bean, and you still have that reproductive capability and nodes being added to the top of the plant to help catch some of those later rainfalls that we hope that we catch.
We joke about state fair rains a lot. This year we didn't get a state fair rain to speak of, but normally in that early part of August we start seeing rain, and even a 4.8 or 9 planted in April was still green and vegetatively growing. It could have benefited from a rain in early August.
Yes, absolutely.
And so when you combine that fact of a wider window of growth for those later beans, while still allowing you to get a better, more robust plant and better light, you kind of reduce some of that risk, in my opinion. That's my opinion. Now, are there fields where maybe it's best to plant a 4.9 or a 5.0 in June? Maybe, because there's some cases where we just don't get rain, or it's a really droughty piece of ground. And I think you got to play that on a field by field basis. If you have average to above ground, all the data would indicate earlier plant, unless you're severely water limited, is a benefit.
And so sometimes I felt too that there could be some exceptions where in this year, I don't know the story that's going to play out with June beans, and we got that late rain and it benefited them. How much it's going to do, I don't know, because some of the components of yield due to the light that you were talking about was there in the early beans. It's not been as much in some of the June. So there could be exceptions sometimes, I think, to the rule, but I'm interested to see how this year is going to play out, what the difference will be.
I think the bottom line is, in agronomy or crop production, there's going to be variables every year that could change your overall result. But in general, what are the few little things we can do to give us that better chance to maximize our yield? And to me, one of those is an earlier plant.
For making sure we go back to simplicity and not getting too caught up in weeds, because my goal was to not do that.
Yeah.
And away I got to go. So thanks for sharing that. I think that's helped me understand a little bit better, some of that components of what is taking place. And of course we could deep dive into this a lot for all day long, really, in this, but thanks for sharing it so well. See you. Thank you, guys. See you next time. The only thing, the weird thing about that is I 100% agree, and it's funny because when prices are high, we say we need to do this practice because prices are so high. When prices are low, sometimes
important.
a little tiny incremental margin is your take home pay.
That's one of the things Hannibal's going to hit. What's the cheap thing? What's a cheap thing we can do to make bigger differences?
Yes,
And
exactly.
planting day, you're going to plant.
Yes.
So,
I think
you know,
that's part of maybe what we're going to do at part of our boost conversation.
yeah,
Maybe
should
driven
be.
a little bit
Yep.
from that. So
It's crazy.
Is that sometimes we ignore the low commodity price times, and I do, but then I stop and think about it.
Might be what helps a guy get by.
It is. I just looked at our farm budget, and it's like some of those little things I started looking at. It's like that was about what I took home to feed my family. Had I not had that incremental change, then we would have done something else.
Yeah.
This camera is still going.
no, it's not. Oh God.
Tailgate talking. Kind of get that kind of move where they're like I was shutting it off, and I just kind of.
Yeah, I got that splinter dissected out.